The Intentional Father podcast. We have Mike Colaw as our guest today. We're going through the 17 laws of the Intentional Father. Law number 3 is law of poison. Only speak life into the identity of your child. Only speak life. And so the opposite is kind of like don't speak death, don't speak pour poison into your kids' lives. But before we jump into the topic, Mike, do you want to give our audience a little bit of background on who you are, who we are, where you're at in the nation, in your career, in your family? And
Yeah,
because I know that, but probably not everyone listening knows. So who is Mike Colaw?
yeah, that's great. Well, first and foremost, I mean, definitely passionate follower of Jesus. That's like the prime identity. Absolutely, I do believe that the pursuit of God is the pursuit of meaning and purpose, right? So we as we understand who God is, we understand our origin, our destination, and our purpose, in the moment. So like my passion for the Lord is like stands above all else. The second thing that I think is really important is, it is really even just our friendship. So like I'll approach this conversation as somebody that can draw from years of experience, Aaron, that you and I have even had together. I think that's kind of a cool thing. And then I also have 5 kids. They are wonderful. My oldest is now married, and my youngest is 3. So I've got like the whole spectrum of age in there. And then let's see what else. I'm education wise, I'm working on finishing my doctorate. I'm on the dissertation phase, so I feel like I'm living in research right now. But it's fun to get to do. And then I pastor in Indianapolis. We have a few campuses around the city, and I love doing ministry for sure with people. So passion, deep passion for family, not just even my own family, but the family of God. And so I'm excited to talk about the law of poison. That'll be fun. Is that enough? Is there anything else that you
No,
want?
that's good. That's good. Indiana. So,
Mhm.
oh, and yeah, we knew each other in middle school is probably when we met, but went
Yeah.
through
Oh,
middle
yeah.
school, high school, college together, started an accountability group in middle school. And so we're still
Yeah.
connected despite the distance between us.
Yeah.
So so Mike is one of those longtime friends,
Mhm.
lifelong friends, and
Yep. Oh, yeah.
very blessed to have you in my life.
Yeah.
Let's
Thanks,
jump
man.
into the law of poison. When you think of our words, how we use them with our children, what are some initial places that your mind goes?
Yeah. So, a couple things. Number one, we know developmentally as children. So, my wife, even though I'm a philosophy theology guy, mostly academically, my wife is psychology, and then my mom was a psychology professor for years. So I grew up immersed, almost by osmosis. I was around a lot of child and adolescent development theory and principles. So. One of the things I think it's important to begin this is realizing that because of how the brain develops, like so the all the way down to like even the fully development of the prefrontal cortex, we don't gain our ability to understand nuance well until we're a little older. So kids will see things more likely to see things as binary, like that's wrong or that's right. Kids don't do well at seeing things nuanced, which means things like sarcasm or like joking are going to hit children way harder than they would adults
Mm.
because kids haven't fully developed the ability to understand the nuance of complicated language. So I think just before we get into even like the law of poison and what's beneficial and what's not, just remember your ability to process nuance. Your kids do not have that yet, especially if they're younger. And so if you're just really sarcastic or you don't or you create speaking through metaphor and simile and stuff like that, kids just aren't going to pick up on the depth of that. It's going to hit them harder. They'll see it. It'll naturally be a good or a hard statement. So I think just when you begin to talk about communicating with children, you just have to begin with that. They are they are fresh, fragile little brains for sure. And so that's kind of my first thought. Does that kind of make sense a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because as I reflect on my grandpa on my dad's side, growing up, I think he had a very dry sense of humor. And I think like if he was picking on you, he liked you. That was kind of like his
Yeah.
little love language. But I remember when I was young thinking he was a little mean. And now,
Yeah.
as I reflect on that, I think I was a product of exactly what you're talking about. It was just going over my head, and I was interpreting it as he was a little harsh or mean. And I wish I would have, well, I wish I could have understood the nuances back then, because I
Yeah.
think I would have really picked up on some banter and been playful with it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I probably wish I would have understood this more when I was even a father of younger children, because I think I picked up some dry sense of humor, and I've really struggled with being too sarcastic in my life, and not just with
Yeah.
my kids, but even when I was a youth pastor with middle school. Sometimes middle schoolers don't even get it. You know,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you drop a great sarcastic joke or dry humor, and it just
Mhm.
flies over their head. So
Yeah.
that's a good. I think it's a great starting point.
Yeah, to open with that idea, just be really, in all honesty, it's just being aware of of your surroundings. Like,
Yeah.
Solomon, when Solomon prays for wisdom, we translated the word wisdom, but really the original Hebrew intent there is Solomon prayed for the ability to see and understand well the world around him. And so, really, in all honesty, knowing what is poisonous and what isn't poisonous doesn't begin within you necessarily. It begins with you understanding the world around you, and that includes your children and what they're taking in and how they observe stuff.
Mm,
So, like, you just you have to be aware of that. That would be like the like driving down the road. Think of like if you're crossing a bridge, you have these like boundary keepers on either side, right? And so like the rails on the road, one road that you can run into is your lack of awareness of where your kids really are and how they're really perceiving things. Like you might say things like, well, I didn't mean it that way. You know what? To a 7-year-old kid, that's irrelevant. I mean, they
right.
can't understand things like an adult can. And so wisdom, I mean, really, wisdom is going to have to begin with you being able to see the world around you well. That would be one side. The other side of this too is how you handle accidentally poisoning, because you're going to say things that will hurt kids'
Yeah.
feelings.
Yeah.
So one side is being blind to the world around you, and then I think the other side of the road, and then we'll talk about a lot of stuff in the middle. I think the other side of the road is your kids need to see you handle when you get it wrong well. And like for example, if your kids always see you justifying your actions away, so it's like it's not my fault, I didn't mean it, I didn't. What you're teaching your kids is they don't have to actually be sorry,
Yeah.
right? Like it's everybody else's fault if they interpret the world in the way I didn't intend them to. And that's that. So it's blindness to the world around me because you don't get it or you're unwilling to look, or it's blindness on the other side to the world around me because you refuse to look. But either
Mhm.
way, you're going to go off the road by choosing to live in a state of blindness. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. This is really good. When I teach public speaking or even preaching, I have this one of the key takeaways, or the bottom line is valuing what your audience hears over what you say.
Oh yeah, that's for
At the
sure right.
at the end of the day, what communication comes down to what your audience is hearing, not what you're saying. And those can be two different things.
Mhm.
Ideally, you want them to be the same, but
Right.
they can be two different things. And yeah, the man, justifying, well, what I said shouldn't have hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
What a horrible.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I've said that too. I mean, I'm not letting myself off the hook, but what a horrible thing to say. Yeah, we need
right.
to
And you think that
value
it's like
that.
layered. So you're, first of all, you're unwilling to maybe look at the world through the lens of a 7-year-old's eyes, right? So that's a blindness, maybe that you don't understand. But the other thing you're doing is you're inadvertently teaching your children that how other people view the world doesn't matter.
Yeah,
And one day that same perspective will be turned back on you.
it'll come around. Double
Yep.
standards. It's You're teaching a double standard.
Yeah, it's totally right. So
Oh,
one example of this, I was talking, we have a wonderful counseling center at the church that I pastor, and one of our therapists, she's amazing. And I was asking her one day, I'm like, man, how do you how do I raise my kids in a way that they want to be around me when they grow up? Like I want them to come home for Thanksgiving. I want them to come home for Christmas. I want them to be around. Well, you don't want to have a poisonous environment. That's the big thing, right?
Yeah.
And she said the primary way is your children will treat you in the way they have seen modeled you treat your parents. So if you talk about your parents as, oh, my mom's dumb, she just doesn't get it. Oh, my dad's ridiculous. Don't be surprised when they become adults and say, oh, my mom's dumb. My parents, they
Mm.
just don't get it. So like if you offer your parents mountains of grace and love and compassion, they may annoy you, but what you're doing is you're creating an environment in which your kids learn, model to them how to offer grace and compassion and kindness that will one day be needed towards you. So, in a sense, the law of poison, the world is broken. Something's going to be poisoned no matter what. I mean, we're going to learn. We'll talk about ways to kind of mitigate some of those as we get into the conversation further. But the other side of this matter, just something to think about, is modeling how you handle when poisonous things happen to you will be how your children handle poisonous things when they happen to them, and it will come through you, even if it's not on purpose. I mean, it just will. Yeah, does that kind of make sense a little bit? So if
Yeah.
you want your
That's
children to love you well, they have to see you loving parents well.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
And I'll do a little insert here for anyone on the YouTube, but law number one is the law of the mirror, lead by example,
yeah,
because that covers everything. All
yeah.
other things at the end of the day, treat your
Mhm.
parents the way your kids want you to treat you. I mean, that if we could just do that,
It changes.
we'll be good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when teaching your kid how to handle a poisonous environment is a huge it's a huge part of that. And yeah, so instead of living afraid that anything might poison them, part of it is teaching them how to handle those things when they do come their way, which we can talk more about here in a minute too. Yeah. Okay. So then another thing that comes to my mind too, and I'm kind of curious what you think. Um, there is, okay, so it's called, sometimes one of my psychology classes years ago, my professor called it the law of inoculation, right? So the law of inoculation is really interesting, not necessarily tied in with the laws that you're doing, but
Right.
just and the law of inoculation is this, like, so how does a kind of a traditional vaccine, how does it work? You give the person a muted enough version of it that they learn how to handle it when the real disease comes their way. So when we say the law of poison, we don't just mean protecting your kids from everything that's out there. A poisonous environment might actually be an environment that's so void of shaping character that they don't become the kind of person that can survive anything well,
Mm,
right? So like if you are in a home and you as a parent are never strong with your child, your child will never learn how to handle strength. And that is if there's like overt poison, that's like an inverted version of poisoning your child to not be able to handle the real world.
yeah. 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 I would say
I've
that's
got an example of this if you want.
well, but hypothetically, it's who was my theology? Chris Bounds. He gave me a
Oh yeah.
mathematical example of love or mathematical definition. He said love equals truth plus mercy or truth plus grace, I think. Uh,
Yeah.
but that the idea of sometimes the truth can be a little abrasive. Grace is more like, oh, we want that. That's a little easier pill to swallow. But one without the other is not true love. If all you have
Yeah.
is truth and there's no grace, well, that's not love. Or no, actually, he said justice. I think it was justice
Yeah.
plus mercy equals love.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah, if that
Mhm.
idea with the law of poison, of course, you don't want to say anything horrible, but you don't want to withhold the truth from your children either.
Yeah. So
That's where it's like if you take it to your analogy, why it's good to let your kids play in the dirt. They need a little bit of the germs to build that healthy immune system. If a kid doesn't hear any truth ever, he's going to go out into the real world and die instantly because all the the underexposure. will be fatal.
Yep, that's right. So you have to, at some point as a parent, sit back and be honest about defining, what do I mean by poison?
Mm,
So if you're a parent and you think any form of strong or like volume, you might think that if too much volume is poisonous, but just pause and ask the question, is that really what is poisonous? Or you might think that what is poisonous is, punishing a child with anything that causes physical pain. So just pause and be aware. Okay, if I raise my child that way, what are the inadvertent things that that child might believe as they experience the world when they become adults? So you really do have to step back and go, what, not only what is poison, but what does an actual healthy adult look like? Because getting to a healthy adult might actually include intensity in the same way that working out does.
mhm.
So like if you take a muscle, I mean, we know this. If you take a muscle and you like you put it in a cast long enough, the muscle will atrophy, and it will not be able to handle real world situations without some form of assistance, a crutch or a wheelchair, if it's atrophied enough. And so to be able to be strong, there has to be a level of resistance and work that's a part of it. So knowing what do I mean is poison is going to be really important. Another example of that might be like you might have a very modern parent that believes that putting on your child any objective truth is poisonous to their psyche. Like you don't have to be a boy, you don't have to be a girl, you don't have to be whatever you want. And so you're freeing them from the weight of objective truth. But what you might actually be doing then to them is setting up them to have to not be able to handle the things that are objectively true about them, right? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yep.
Um, that's kind of a deep idea. It's definitely kind of a
Yeah,
deep
it can
idea.
go deep for sure. The shallow version for me, I mean, my personality, like I'm kind of steady. I don't have really high highs or really low lows. I'm just kind of here. And I found myself being very self-controlled when my kids are misbehaving or whatever. And if I address it monotoned or just in the steady rhythm that I am, I found that they're not understanding the weight of my words, and
Yeah,
they're not fully uh, appreciating how serious I am because I'm
yeah,
not super high or super low. And so I've had to
right.
raise my voice, and I'll even articulate to them, I don't like being this intense with my voice, but the situation calls for it because your behavior is
Yeah.
unacceptable. And so I kind of have to
Mhm.
almost force myself to be a little more intense because I don't, I
Mhm.
mean, naturally, I don't like that. I'm like, let's strive for peace. I don't like conflict. I'm a little conflict avoidant, but I conflict is good, right? Any healthy relationship requires conflict. And so I found myself even going, oh, okay, I need to turn it up a little bit and express a little more emotion because the lack thereof is not healthy for my kids.
Yeah, I mean,
That's like,
imagine with me, I actually had this happen. Years ago, I had a police officer that was sharing with me that at one point they walked in there was a big complex situation, and they walked in on a girl that I mean, I don't want to mess up your YouTube algorithm, that was being,
you
starts
could
with an
say it.
R, mistreat, rape, that was being raped. So walked in on a young lady that was being, and you walk in and the cop just was talking about the weight of all of it, and and the cop was violent. He violently grabbed the guy, violently pulled the guy off of that young girl, and then he was kind of like even wrestling with how to, and I looked at him and I was like, I mean, do you realize that intensity doesn't always necessarily equal wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Like there are times, for the sake of what is objectively healthy, it is good for you to be intense. And I think, man, I think if we want to raise kids, not only that have as best as we can a poison-free home, which no one can ever do that totally, but you want to raise kids that can be pursuers of justice in a poisonous world. You're going to have to raise them not just avoiding what's bad, but giving them tools to be able to handle it well.
Yeah.
And that's important as a parent.
Yeah. I just started the Fellowship of Fathers, a little small group coming off this podcast thing. And there was a gentleman there who he responded to one of the rules. just a household rule I have. My kids aren't allowed to drink alcohol. And
Yeah.
he was asking, well, man, if you tell a child no, doesn't that make them want to do it all the more? And like, how do we do it? So shouldn't we just tell them yes to everything and not no? But I I took it to a place where I'm like, it's okay to have absolutes. Like,
Mhm.
are you okay with your child murdering someone? No. Unacceptable behavior, not
Mhm.
permissible. I mean, maybe you call self-defense something different than murder, but it's like if you get
Yeah.
angry at a guy, you can't go out and kill him. Like that's not okay. And if you do, I'm going to turn you in. Like it's wrong. It's
Yeah.
against the law. And it's okay to have those absolutes. The nice thing about you and I is with the Christian faith, the the faith provides we get those in the scripture that we don't have to come up with those on our own.
Yeah.
Let
That's
the
right.
Bible define those for us. But yeah, I think you're right. It is definitely okay and healthy to put the weight of those absolute truths on our children
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
otherwise,
I
and
mean,
that's
even
what I mean, you kind of addressed the whole like sexual identity thing, but that's the problem with it. You want to live in a world of relativism. That's look where that's led. That's not
yeah.
good.
No, well, yeah, yeah. I mean, C.S. Lewis says to see through everything is to see nothing, right? Like, so inevitably, what happens is if you don't giving your kids objective things that they have to learn to adapt to, they don't have the choice or the freedom. They have to learn to adapt to that. Actually, creates intellectual, spiritual, and emotional scaffolding, right? So, like, when I sit down with my children, I would ask questions like this. I would say, what do you not get to choose about you? So they might say like, well, I didn't choose to be born into your family. I'm like, nope, you didn't. You didn't get to choose that. So you have to figure out what does it look like to live life to the full, and we'll get to that in a minute, within something that you did not get to choose. How do you bring life to that? What other things did you not get to choose about you? Like my son one time said, I didn't get to choose how tall I am. I was like, you're right, you don't. And so, but you're
Mhm.
going to have to adapt to that. And um, it doesn't mean that you have to be victim to all of it, but you have to learn to respond to it because there's many things we didn't get to choose about ourselves that we really dislike. But it's actually those places of dislike that might even be called poison, depending on the parent. But it's just an objective thing that's real. When you give your kids tools to handle what is objectively real around them in a way that can be life giving, you give them a tool that helps them adapt to all kinds of situations when you send them out as adults.
Yeah, it's good.
Unbelievably important. Another thing that we do is I teach my children. So to be life giving is to be seers of the world around you, as we mentioned earlier. So like when your kids get off the bus, a really simple thing to do is don't just ask your kid, or you pick your kid up from church. Don't just ask your kid, "Hey, how was your day?" Purposely, you can do that too. I'm not saying it's bad, but purposely ask your child, like if they have a friend. So if like my friend, Noah has a friend named Peter. So if I pick Noah up from school, I'll go, "Hey, Noah, how was Peter's day today?" And I make him others aware.
Mm. Man, that's
I'm not just
good.
asking him
That's
how was your
good.
day? And I've done this with my kids. So I ask them, how's your day? And I also do this I also do this with my kids, even with like my spouse, right? So like if I'm hanging out, or I'll take one of my daughter around to practice driving or something, and I'll be like, hey, Emma, how do you think mom's doing today? Others aware. You building in them the ability to see other people. Their own perspective of the world is not the only engine. They have to be able, like Solomon, they have to be able to observe and understand rightly the world around them. That's unbelievably important, I think. And again, we've not even gotten to putting life into stuff. We're just talking about
Yeah.
creating the kind of people that
Yeah.
can respond to a world that is full of poison and difficulty, and how to be good observers. So we don't want to run into the boundary. So think of it like a road, and you've got the barricade, or
Mhm.
the what is on the side of the road, the guardrails on
Guardrail.
the side of the road. You've got one guardrail that's like, I don't see because I don't understand, right? It doesn't make sense to me. The other guardrail is, I'm so self-focused, I'm blind. And so we're teaching our children how to be seers of the world around them. And we're teaching our children how to be able to respond in ways that can be life-giving to things that are difficult is massive. So that hopefully those ideas kind of make sense a little bit. I went through some of them kind of
I
fast.
wrote that question down because I don't use that question, but what a fantastic question. I'll ask questions like, did anything crazy happen at school today or anything weird, just to get them out of that. How was your
Shocking.
day? It's kind of a boring question, but yeah.
I don't even like,
How
to
was
be
your
honest,
friend's
this,
day? And pick a
yeah,
friend and just choose them. Yeah, man. Because then they're going
yeah,
to
and if,
start looking for that. Man, if dad
that's
asked
right.
me today, yeah, what a great way to be outward focused.
Yeah, because one of the worst poisons you can offer your children is them believing that they're the center of the world. They're not.
Preach it, brother.
And really we have this. I mean, if you follow the chain back, you go back to like, Hume and Rousseau and the early Enlightenment, 1700s, and this idea that what is most true about the world is how I experience it through my senses. I mean, this is so woven into our cultural DNA now that what is most true is my perspective of the world around me. And the reality is there are objective truths. The first poison that our culture pours on our children is what do you think? And that's the primary definer of reality. I even so
Mm,
detest, like the doctoral student, I even so detest that in colleges or in high schools now, they're asking kids all the time, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? They need to be asking kids, what is true about this?
yes.
Helping them not only look at the world through their own eyes, but to be able to look at the world through the lens of objective truths is a massive, massive part of shaping people. And in all honesty, yeah, you know, post-modernity enlightenment, taking that out of the people. So, anyways, those are some thoughts on that.
Okay.
Um, okay, I mean, unless you have other questions, I've got a few. So that's dealing with it. I've got a few like life-giving things that could be dropped in to think about.
Let's do it.
Um, I've got, hey, hopefully you can edit this.
Oh,
I
team
love
Uncle
you
Aaron.
very, 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 very much. I love you. She's got the right hat on. You are a wonderful daughter. I like you very much. Hey,
I'm going to tell you something after you're done with your meeting.
first thing you need to do is I want you to look around the room and see what's happening. What's happening right now? What's happening? What's Daddy doing? What is Daddy doing?
Meeting?
A meeting. That's right. It is totally cool, and I love to talk with you. But what should you do if you see that somebody's in the middle of a conversation in a meeting?
Sorry.
Nope, I love you a ton, and you matter a lot. Love you, baby girl. There you go. So I mean, there's a tactical
There
example
you
right
go.
there.
Good
That's
job. Hey,
not
you're
unloving.
you're on the spot right there. This is live parenting.
I,
Good job.
I know. I mean, in my mind, it's not unloving I love my daughter more than life. I am loving her better by teaching her to observe the world and not
Yes.
assuming that everything revolves around her.
Yes.
That will
Just
help
so
her
everyone
become
knows, that was not staged. That really happened. Not
that
not
really
staged.
that really did happen. And I'd give my life for her in a heartbeat. She is absolutely, absolutely wonderful, but it's important for her to become the kind of person that can see the world around them well. Um, okay, so life-giving things, and you just hit the brakes on anything. Ask any questions you want.
All right.
I'll throw some ideas out there. The first thing I think that's important for our kids to know. So now we've gone from like kind of like a responding to the world around us, seeing the world around us. Now we're moving to like intentionally doing things in the home, and ideas that they need. So how do you seed life? The first thing that I think is important is God created you and loves you. You have origin, and that origin is relational and it desires you. That is unbelievably important. You are not an accident. You are fearfully and wonderfully made, as the Bible says. And that love, I mean, is fully made manifest in Jesus Christ. So I just think every kid needs to know, hey, independent of whether your mom and dad had you on purpose, you are loved by literally the guy who designed the universe. You are treasured. You matter. And so that identity, that foundational identity, I think is essential for kids. God created them and loves them deeply. Yeah, that's the first thought. Second thought is this, and this is again for my kids. We by nature are always looking for meaning, right? We're always looking for meaning. It's built into us. And I mean, the text talks about this, right? Like the natural revelation, whether you are a Christian or a believer or religious or not, we're always looking for meaning and purpose. And so when you give your kids an anchor of identity, so not just God created you and loves you, but you also add the Bible is God's word and it is worth compassing your life around it. So now they have origin and they have mechanism for living in the present. So as I lean into the Word of God, I know where I'm from, and I know what I'm learning what I'm supposed to do in it. The other thing I would say about the Bible too that I think is really important is emphasize the Bible is not a scientific book, though there are little hints at it in there, science stuff. That's not its purpose. The Bible is a love letter. Your origin is you were created, right? So it's the whole story of humanity, how humans fell, how humans are redeemed, and how the family of God is ultimately made whole. And God wants that your child to be a part of that too. And so I think the Bible as objectively true, and the Bible is a love letter, and that love letter includes you, child. It includes you. I think that's huge for children. And then the other thing that I would say, well, anything on those two, or do you want me to keep going?
No, that's good. Keep going.
The other thing I would say too is Jesus as the only way to salvation. And I know that there are people out there that may not be, or they may be not religious at all. But the reality is, man, to see through everything is to see nothing. You know, if every way is the right way, then there is no right way. People desire to have just look at the life of Jesus Christ. It is so unbelievably good. Perfect charitable love poured out for people that don't. I mean, that's the whole message of the Bible that don't even deserve it. And so when you center somebody's like you take the definition of what is good at the very center of that target, you put the life of Jesus Christ. You set before them a model of objective, tangible, glorious, selfless love that sets them up not only for a life that then can make and participate in good love, but a life that can actually make the world around them better. They can become a force for good. Jesus models what a force for good actually looks like. A force for good doesn't blow everybody up. A force for good doesn't have to steal from somebody else so that you can be the most powerful. A force for good doesn't have to be, the TikTok, Instagram, whatever. A force for good is charitable. I mean, Jesus lived. How many people did Jesus baptize? He had his disciples do it. When the world was being turned upside down, it was because Jesus sent the disciples out to it. There's just selflessness woven into all of the life of Christ. So those are like the tenets. You have origin, you have compass for living today, and you have a model of what it looks like to be a force for good. Those are huge for me. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does.
Go ahead.
Do you have a more list there?
Oh, I've got a handful of more things, but I can skip or add or do whatever you want, man.
So I made a note of Proverbs 18:21. It says the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. But that idea that we can use our words, we can use this tongue to bring either life or death. And man, one of the notes I had is like, what are some things you should never say to your child? And one of them, you hit the nail on the head. You were an accident. Like, there's if we reverse engineer this, it's like, could you think of some things that you could say with your words that would completely destroy your child or give them a complex for life, cause eternal emotional damage? It's like, yes. How about we start off by not saying those things and then take
Yeah.
it to the opposite and go, okay, well, what can we say?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. We have a couple of kids that we did not plan on having. And the way I have worded it to them is I will say, hey, because the older kids were talking about it, they're like, hey, mom and dad, you were an accident. Mom and dad didn't plan on having you. It's true. We didn't plan on having him. So what I did is that night when I tucked my little girl in bed, I was like, hey, I want you to know something. God gave you like a Christmas gift on Christmas morning. I didn't know it was coming. I wasn't prepared for it, but God gave you like a gift to me. And I'm so glad he did. I'm glad you were born. I'm glad God gave you to us. And in that, I am acknowledging the truth. I wasn't ready for it, but I'm also acknowledging the truth. The main person who decides intention and origin, that it was on purpose. And then I also make sure to add in there, I'm glad for the gift. Like,
Yeah.
I'm glad for the gift. I'm
Yeah.
glad that God gave me that gift. So I'm glad, hey, I'm glad you were born. And like a Christmas gift, I'm so glad God gave you to us. Um, and so it's okay. I think it's okay to acknowledge if the child wasn't planned on purpose by the parents, but you can still leave one, and you can give the primary person to the person who really deserves the primary origin and purpose, which is God, anyways.
Yeah. And that's a good example of what you're referencing earlier. Like, you don't want to shelter your child so much that they don't have a grip on reality. But
Yeah.
yeah, the speaking of truth while still shaping their positive identity, I think you do a great balance there. And
Yeah.
that's the right approach.
That's right. And so, I mean, all this, all the way back to centering. So like one of the other things that I have in here that I think is important is you centering. Okay. So centering, you're called to love others as Jesus does. So think about this like not just at the individual level, think about it at a societal level. To be Judeo-Christian is to put at the center of a society the life and ways of Christ. I mean, like, think about it. When a whole society makes their prime identity be glorious, selfless love and submission to it, doing good unto others, independent of their ability to reciprocate, is the way I had my kids memorize it. It's super nerdy. But like when you put at the very center of a society and the center of a heart, that you compass them for life in powerful, powerful ways. Which is why I like I'm telling you, what do you want to put at the center of a society? That making money, that the free market is that whatever company gets the biggest and has the most power wins? What do you want to put at the center of a society? The guy who has the biggest tanks and biggest bombs is the most. What do you want to put at the center of a society? I am unashamed to say that an actual culture ought to put the life of Jesus Christ at the very center of it. What better thing could you put at the center than perfect charitable love on display for the good of the other? I mean, not to get too political, but I think I'm going to post this. I had somebody ask Pastor Mike recently, what is the big deal with abortion? You might want to cut this out, but like, what is the big deal with abortion? Why do Christians make such a big, can't you see it's complicated? And I basically, some bishops in the Catholic Church have talked about this through history, but like, Jesus says, this is my body broken for you. Abortion says, this is my body, I'll break yours for me. Right? Christianity says, I lay down my life that you might live. Abortion says, I lay down your life that I might live. Christianity says, you're not quite fully alive yet, but you're worth risking everything for the potential of eternal life. Abortion says, you're not quite fully alive yet, your life doesn't matter. Like, to put at the center of a society selfless charitable love is so wildly good. And so I am unashamed to defend Christ as the very thing that should be the center, not just of the person, but of the community, of the society. So hopefully that kind of makes sense a little bit.
Yeah, it's good.
And if you want to cut that out, you can.
No, it doesn't need to be cut out. And that, if you don't have that Judeo-Christian worldview, you might look at abortion from a convenience standpoint, even from an economic standpoint. And it's like, I've read the literature, I get it, I understand it, but the selfless viewpoint changes everything. And then the whole image of God,
they bear the imago Dei, the image of God.
I see a difference between humanity and cows, animals. That's why I eat meat. I know some people put them on this same level almost, and either up or down. And it's like, I think we're made in the image of God, and life is worth preserving. There's something special there.
You want to think about breathing life into your children. Help them understand that they are wonderfully and intentionally made. Help them understand that life is worth defending. Help them understand whether it's an old person that might not be able to to give a whole lot back to society, there still is wisdom and uniqueness in relationship that makes it valuable. You want your child to feel like they still have worth, even if they're not great at school, even if they have learning disabilities, even if they're not great at sports. Show them that life alone and relationships alone are worth defending. And then your kid doesn't have to be wealthy. Your kid doesn't have to be famous. Your kid doesn't have to be really good at school, and your kid doesn't have to be a great athlete. And they can still intrinsically know I have worth because I'm created in Imago Dei, image of God.
Yeah.
It's all of these core principles, man, that set ultimate selflessness and modeled in Christ Jesus, that defends the uniqueness of human life. And you breathe that into your child, that combo, man. And these are almost like they're not tensions to manage. They are tensions that uphold what life to the full looks like.
Yeah.
That you are totally selfless and you are defending the value of human life as being uniquely different Imago Dei.
And there's it's not just hypothetical. There's such a functional aspect of that perspective. If you listen to the Navy SEALs, that's like the number one thing they say is unique about being on a SEAL team, is knowing that the guy behind them cares about the dude in front of them more than they care about themselves. Completely selfless. And think, man, if it's that functional that the elite military uses it, it's not just some pie in the sky, feel good, fluffy spirituality. Like it is good philosophy and spirituality, but it's very good day-to-day practicality in life. It'd be good for society. So that's that I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. The other thing I would say too, so in the things that you're offering, you need to offer your children the opportunity to see you be humble before God. Like they need to see you say sorry. They need to see you come in and go, you know what? I got that wrong. I really dropped the ball here. And I need to apologize to you. And even before God, I was really acting selfish in this situation, or what came out of me did not honor the heart of Jesus Christ. They need to see you compass your life around that as the center. That is a life-giving compassing that you can offer them too, I guess. Yep. That's really good. And then just a couple of other things that go through. I don't know how long we've been here. I probably ought to honor your time. I've not been watching the clock at all. But a couple other things that come to my mind too is and these are tangential to some of the other things we've mentioned, but just being really clear to your child, your identity is found in Christ and who God says you are, not in what others say about you, and not even in what you may feel about yourself at times. So like you might wake up one day and be like, I feel like I'm worthless. And the reality is your worth isn't defined by others, and your worth isn't defined by you.
Yeah.
It's defined by your creator. And that is important. So even if you're having a hard day, you don't have to fake that you're having a good day. You can come home and be like, dude, it was a hard day today, kids. But I just want you to know, I believe in my heart, my identity is not in how I feel about myself or even what that other person at work said about me. The truest thing about me is what God says about me. And he says I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and that I'm loved beyond measure, and that he wants me in his family, and that I have an eternal home, and that all things will be made just in the end. And so that I think is an essential piece of this too. The very last thing I would say is what you model then. I mean, there are other little random things that you could sprinkle in there, but one of the other things that runs through my mind is your kids need to see you model priority. So like if you model priority based on what will give the child the greatest opportunity to find life to the full. So if you, I'm coming out intense. So it's like, if you wake up as a Christian, if you wake up on Sundays and you're like, we will not miss our soccer games, and we will not miss you are showing your kids that their greatest allegiance is to something that will be very short-lived in their life and actually doesn't have the ability to make them whole. You need to model to your children that their greatest allegiance ought to be to the thing that actually can make them most whole. And so I know it's like, it's a pastor just defending church. No, it's not just a pastor defending church. It is a pastor defending you prioritizing what actually has the ability to make your child most whole. And you teaching your children to give all of themselves to something that will be long left in the dust. I don't think it's worth the risk, personally. So, anyways, that was kind of my last thought. Is one of the other life-giving things you can give is prioritization of time, and one of the worst poisons you can give them is letting the prioritization of your time not match your ethic that you claim.
Yeah, that's good.
Those are some of the ideas off the top of my head, with some of the stuff that we've been doing in our in our own home. Uh, Thoughts, comments, questions? Is there anything that you're going, man, this didn't make sense? I ran through some of these pretty quickly.
No, there, yeah, I think it's good highlighting the impact when a parent, especially a father, can apologize to his children.
Yeah,
There's kind of the hot topic out there right now, or that the hot term is narcissism, but the ability to, one,
mhm,
recognize when you're wrong, but two, apologize when you're wrong. It's hard to do, but you're killing the narcissist within yourself when you do that. And
yeah,
it's kind of scary to put to death the old man so the new man can live. But what
yeah,
I found, because I've done, I probably haven't done as much as I should, but when you start to look for those times when you can apologize to your children so you can model that by example, there's the fear that says, oh, I'm being vulnerable here, I'm going to be taken advantage of, because when I'm vulnerable I'm weak, and when I'm weak and I'm exposed, and so my kids are going to take advantage of it. But that never happens. It's always,
yeah,
it never taken advantage of. It doesn't weaken or break down the family unit. It actually strengthens and builds up the family unit. And I think maybe in a way, apologizing to your children when you're wrong is, it's killing the narcissist within them too, because they're
yeah,
seeing modeled, okay, what does a real man look like? What does a godly man look like? And if dad
yeah,
can apologize when he's wrong,
yeah,
then I can
yeah,
too. And now that's the standard.
yeah,
That's the expectation for our family, for our faith, fill in the blank. That's what we do here. And
yeah.
that's, yeah, I would highlight that. And it's not easy. It's not easy,
No,
but man, it is the good work of
yeah.
a father.
And even it makes me think. It makes me think ultimately of like heaven and hell. So like there's this Orthodox esque idea from some of the Orthodox philosophers and thinkers of like what is ultimately heaven and what is ultimately hell, and we can model to our children the directions. So like if you have a child that does something wrong, and they feel conviction, and they come to you and they're like, I am so sorry. Or maybe you've done something wrong. I'm so sorry. And it feels good to get that off of your chest, to make it right. It feels good to do that. Or if you catch somebody that's done something wrong and they don't want to be caught, they want to keep living in the dissonance or brokenness that they've been choosing, then it's like they hide away and there's a pushing against the light. So whether you want the light or want to fight the light depends primarily on the posture of your heart. In fact,
Mm.
so some of the Orthodox philosophers and thinkers think that hell, this is so interesting, hell and heaven are literally our response to the penetrating love of God that nothing can be hidden from. So think of like, I want to be seen and known, and I want my heart to be right, and I want to confess. When that is in the presence of total penetrating love, it feels eternally good to be seen. But if you have a heart that's like, I don't want to be seen, I want it, like I don't want to make it right, I don't want to be good, then the penetrating love of God burns like a fire. And heaven and hell is not that God changes his nature, whether it's a heaven or a hell, is that posture of heart extrapolated out for eternity. So whether the love of God is immeasurably good to be made right and get it out, or whether the love of God burns like a fire, depends on the posture of your heart. Now, whether that really is, like in how heaven and hell
Yeah.
actually will be, but there is something there, and that idea
Yeah.
is Model to your children that it is objectively good and it can feel good to make things right before
Yes.
God. Model that to them. And you teach them how to pursue a kind of heart that can enjoy the full, transparent, see it all love of God. That's so massive, I think, for setting kids up. And the poison that you can pour on your children is always protecting and being like hurt and angry, and I'm a victim and it's not fair. That posture of heart teaches your children to run in a direction away from honesty, truth, and the very nature of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. And so you're teaching your children accidentally to pursue a hell when you teach them to be victim. It's not my fault. I don't like it. Don't do that poison. Choose to model how good it feels to make things right.
Has Eddie told you the story of Trey when
Oh no.
when I guess so our youth pastor's name's Eddie. When his son was, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, young, but I guess apparently old enough for the story. The son did something that he knew was wrong, and it was in a context where the parents didn't know about it, but he was living with that. But he knew that the exposure to the light did bring forgiveness and freedom. And so he ended up not just telling his dad what he did, but he asked to be punished for it to seek redemption.
Yeah.
So a kid saying, Dad, I did this wrong thing. Can you please punish me? He came and asked. And I think that's a super healthy sign of a uh, not only a mature person, but the evidence of exactly what you're talking about working itself out in real life, in the innocence of a child going like, yeah, okay, I
Yeah.
knew that was bad, but I also need to be punished for it. And really, he was redemption. I don't know the right word there, but to make things right and whole. And that story stuck with me because, yeah, it man, to hide and cover up and be ashamed. Yeah,
It's hell.
I've done it too. I get it in the moment why you want to do that, but man,
Right.
to hide that forever, that's
Yeah.
to me, that's hell. It's like, let's get
It
some
is.
forgiveness and freedom here.
Yeah, and these, I mean, like even guys like Lewis lean into that idea. So if you ever read the Chronicles of Narnia and the last battle, he's got the dwarves are for the dwarves. They're unwilling to see Aslan and turn their hearts toward him, and they end up leaning even in heaven. They end up leaning into an inward
Yep.
darkness. They can't see the good around them, and so my goodness in the name of Jesus, even in my own heart, I just rebuke bitterness and I rebuke, pride and victim mentality. No, we want to pursue making hearts right before God. That is a heaven.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, confession, baby, confession, absolutely
Confession.
so powerful. In fact, if you go back, you're gonna have to stop me. Gregory the Great. So one of the primary guys. So Pope Gregory the Great from years and years and years ago, he would say others have said about him that he valued confession and absolution even more than homilies. Like if you were a pastor in a community, like
Wow.
practicing the art of confessing what's true and hearing what's true about you back from the priest is more important than just considering an idea in a sanctuary.
Wow.
Boom. I mean, like we kind of walked away from that.
Yeah.
But it does, it shapes you. Those things shape you. And so, anyways, yeah, this
Well,
is
and I'll
good, man. This is
It's
good
good.
stuff.
It's good. I'm going to end with this by thanking you for being a person that I can come to and confess. So Mike and I are still in an accountability group, and when I screw up, Mike's one of the first people to hear about it, and
Me
it's
too.
it's still like, oh, okay, guys, confession time. Here's what I did. I've
Yep.
repented, but I just gotta say it out loud. And you've
Mhm.
always been gracious to extend the forgiveness, both from a spiritual kind of godly standpoint and from a personal standpoint. So thanks for being a good friend to me. Thanks for being a good father and a role model for all of us dads to learn from and look after. And thanks for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, it's fun, man. I appreciate you. Love you a ton.
Love you too.